Hi, Anna.
Hello everyone. Hi, Solange.
Well, I think that we can start. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to SciELO Webinar Series. I'm Solange Santos, SciELO Publishing Coordinator and also a representative of SciELO Network Committee. In order to provide some level of accessibility to this presentation, to this webinar, I will try to describe myself. I am a Black, light-skinned woman, curly brown hair, tied now back in a ponytail. I'm wearing a red blouse and I'm appearing on your screen from the shoulders up. This is the first webinar in the series of that SciELO is organizing to journals editors. And today we are pleased to have with us Ana Heredia. Ana Heredia, she is a biologist with master degree in neuroscience at Université Paul Sabatier in France. Her PhD is in science at Université Libre de Bruxelles in Belgium. She worked for 10 years at Elsevier as a manager of scientific journals to Brazil and also a scientific advisor to Latin America. Now she's working at Orchid, where she's responsible for South America and for publishing across the Americas. Ana, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Ana, please, your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, Solange, thank you so much. I am very honored to be with SciELO and talking to the English-speaking part of the network, right? I am based in Brazil. I am Argentinian. I am going to describe myself because I think this is an excellent initiative to try to include more people. And I'm really hoping that technology will evolve so we can be able also to speak and have the transcription at the same time so people can follow us, in other ways as well. So I'm very pleased to be here with you today. I hope this webinar will be useful for you. I know that you guys, editors, know a lot about what you do and also about Orchid, but I hope that I will bring some new things and numbers for you. And of course, I'll be happy to answer your questions at the end. So I am, I would say, not that white-skinned person. I am more like an Iberian type, Spain and Italy mixed. I am Argentinian. I am based in Brazil. I have been living in Brazil for 40 years. I have a round face. I'm wearing glasses. I have a medium hair at the shoulder level. And I would say that I have all the correct, wavy hair, brown, and I am like a very common person, I would say. So let me share my screen. And I will just ask Solange if my screen is loading and if everything is fine.
It's loading. It's fine for me.
Right. Great. So let's start talking about Orchid and sharing the experience that we have been working with Orchid Brazil, or with SciELO Brazil, sorry. And we would like to share this experience with you today. Orchid stands for Open Researcher and Contributor Identifier. It is important, the contributor part is important for Orchid because it's about inclusion, about including everyone that brings any light, any information to the research ecosystem. So not necessarily researchers per se, right? So, oops. So Orchid's vision is a world where all who participate in research, scholarship, and innovation are uniquely identified and connected to their contributions and their affiliations, and that across time, disciplines, and borders. So this is what contributors and researchers stands for as well. So here is just a curious slide to show why Orchid started, what is the main reason for Orchid to exist, which is to try to solve or to bring a solution to the ambiguation in the name of researchers problem, right? So here you have the top part of an article where you can see a lot of authors, and you can see in yellow that many of these authors share their last name and even sometimes the first initial of their names. And just to add a little bit of humor of that, you can see on the right upside part of the slide an exchange, a tweet exchange between two authors, and one saying to the other, I am the 38th author of an article, and the other says, oh my God, this is not good. And the other say, but this is not finished. I am the 38th author called Wang. So this is to give an idea of the complexity of the problem. I mean, in our Latin countries, we have sometimes two names, three last names. There are other countries where other alphabets are used, not the Latin alphabet, or you have name changes. And so this adds up to the complexity of the problem. So here you can see two columns. One column is about Orchid as an organization, and the other column is about Orchid, the Orchid ID, the Orchid as an identifier. So Orchid as an organization is born in 2012. Is an organization, a non-profit organization, an open organization. All the documents and all the information about Orchid and that Orchid produces, the codes, everything is open. Orchid is supported by its member. So last year we reached break even. This means that the number of members we have now is enough to sustain the organization. And Orchid is driven by and for the community. So Orchid was born by members of the community that got together and tried to find a solution for the ambiguity name problem. We are a small organization and we want to remain small and stick to our values and missions. So we are a staff of 35 people, and soon you will see the number of members and numbers of people that have an Orchid ID today. So you can imagine the amount of work that we have to do, happily. So on the right column, you can see Orchid as an identifier. So Orchid is a unique and persistent identifier, an open identifier of 16 digits. It's free for the researchers. It's portable. So it means that the researcher owns the Orchid ID, and it goes with this person along its career, along its life, independently of the affiliations, the countries, or whatever disciplines they are working on. And this is represented, the Orchid ID is represented as an URL. So here, the next slide is to show to you the three entities that we are talking about. So first of all, there is the researcher, then there is Orchid as an organization, and also as a database, right? The Orchid registry with a big capital letter, right? And there is the research organizations that will use the Orchid API to transfer data, to connect data and transfer data between the systems, right? So the researcher creates the Orchid ID. Only the researcher can create the Orchid ID. The organization or another person cannot create an Orchid ID on behalf of this person. The researcher has to populate the record, connect this record with different databases and systems, and Orchid saves all these records in the Orchid registry, and then the organization, as I just mentioned, use the Orchid API to transfer information between the systems. So this is how it works between the Orchid registry and the system of the institutions. It can be a repository, it can be the submission system, the grant system, the HR system. And the Orchid API will allow the bi-directional flow of information between the two systems. So in terms of orchid adoption, we have currently more than 9 million people that have an orchid ID around the world. We have more than 1,100 member organizations around the globe in more than 45 countries. And we have consortia in 23 countries. You have a consortia in South Africa, for example. And this means that it is a group of 5 or more organizations that get together to have a common and collective approach to the orchid adoption. So in the map, you can see in blue the countries where we have members, spare members, but not consortia. And in green, you can see the countries where we have consortia and spare members as well. So just to have an idea of the number of orchid IDs and the number of member organizations in each of the countries of the SciELO network, I put all of them here. So you can see, for example, that sometimes we have a lot of orchid IDs in some countries, right? For example, in Argentina or in Cuba or in Ecuador, but still no member organization. So in terms of member organizations, I would say Brazil has 13 members. 5 of them are in a consortium. SciELO is a part of this consortium. And so we have, for example, in South Africa, we have 20 members. We have a consortia there. So this leverages the orchid adoption around the world. So there is also an increasing orchid adoption in research workflows. So from these more than 1,000 members, we have almost 900 integrations with the organization systems. We have more than 59 million works added to ORCID records. The majority of them have an identifier. Of course, the most renowned identifier is the DOI. And also, currently we have more than 2 million peer review items added to the ORCID records by the publishers. So in terms of benefits, sorry for the format of the slide. I think that uploading it to Google Slides made some changes, and I apologize for that. So in terms of benefits for researchers, ORCID solves the name ambiguity problems. ORCID helps researchers to get credit for their contributions as all the pollution is found. It helps researchers save time by reducing the capture of data in the same data in different systems. As I mentioned before, portability and the complete control of your information. So the user control which information is in their ORCID record and who they are going to share this information with. So the next slide is our virtuous circle, our mantra, which is enter once, reuse often. The idea is that the researcher is in the center of this virtual cycle, because nothing happens, no connection happens without the acknowledgement, without the permission of the researcher. So the researcher is at the center, and around the researcher, we have the employer, so the university, we have the funder, and we have the publisher. And the idea is that by using the ORCID API to make these integrations, by interacting with the organization's systems, the researcher will share their ORCID ID, their authenticated ORCID ID, that the university will collect, right? And in return, the university can connect information that it's held in their systems inside the university to the ORCID record of the researcher. So typically, the organization can assert the researcher's affiliation, and can, for example, push works from the institutional repository to the researcher's ORCID record. Then when this researcher goes and applies for a grant, the researcher can also share their authenticated ORCID ID that is collected by the funder, that is embedded in all the process of reviewing this submission. And then at the end, this information can be connected to the researcher's ORCID record about the grant received. The same happens when this researcher is going to submit an article to a publisher, right? The publisher collects the ORCID ID, and then can, in return, by using the member API, connect information to this ORCID record. So this means that all the actors involved in this ecosystem can benefit from the information that is added by everybody, right? So in this sense, ORCID works as a hub between systems with asserted information. So this all happens because we have persistent identifiers, right? We have persistent identifiers for people, for things, for objects, and for places. And of course, the most known persistent identifier is the DOI. But we have a lot of many others in the ecosystem. And currently there is a tendency of all the items involved in the research have an identifier. So we're going to talk about this a little bit later. So about the importance of authentication. So the authentication ensures that the ORCID ID is correctly shared between systems. It avoids errors by including IDs in the metadata. So it avoids typographic errors, conciliation errors. And also it allows the researchers, the users, to be in complete control of which permissions are being given and to whom. So here you can see two screenshots in Spanish, but it's all the same little, it's the same outline for the authentication or the permission screen. Here, I want to show you a little bit how these connections are represented in the ORCID record, right? As we would say that the ORCID record would work as a hub, right? We can start seeing here that when this is a case, a person that really exists, Leo Carling. So here you can see this record. This is this person's ORCID record, and you have the ORCID ID, and also you can connect other identifiers. So here we are already connecting different people identifiers, right? There are also identifiers for places, right? So still in this Dr. Leo Carling ORCID record, you can see that the professor added his affiliation. So the identifier for his university, which is the University of Glasgow, is added to his ORCID record, connecting this identifier for university. Here you can see identifiers for things, contributions in one side, and funding awards on the other side. So you can see how this information is linked and connected by the identifiers in the ORCID record of this researcher. And here you can see a print screen of the funding agency page, where I'll show you in the next slides where the ORCID ID of this researcher is included. The same in the left part, you can see it's a PubMed Central article, and you can see here in the ORCID record that the identifiers, the DOI and the PubMed ID are included in the ORCID record of this researcher. So when we go to the UK Research and Innovation Agency, who gave this researcher the award, you can see that you can find more information. So you click in the ORCID record of this research in this piece of information, and you are driven to the UK Research and Innovation Agency, where you can see more information about this grant, and even you can see the ORCID ID is connected with this platform as well. So in terms of works, I showed you a NeuroPubMed Central article. So when you click in this information, the ORCID record of the researcher, you are sent to the platform of PubMed Central, where you can see the article and you can have more information about the the co-authors, and as they have their ORCID IDs connected to the article. So the name disambiguation, about name disambiguation, when we use identifiers for people, things, and places, we improve the interoperability and the synchronization of this trusted metadata in all the systems with whom this researcher is interacting. So this brings us to another topic, which is the importance of ORCID and the persistent identifiers in general for open research. Here you can see an article where there is a lot of authors, but thankfully most of them with their ORCID ID. So the idea is that when research contributions are findable, centrally located, and linked to the individuals involved in these contributions via their ORCID, data and deliverables can be more easily shared and reused. Researchers can find each other and make connections. And also it's missing here, but researchers can get, sorry, credit for their work. So very quickly, there are two ways to register for an ORCID ID. First of all, the auto register, and there are two steps of control to avoid creating another ORCID record by mistake when you already have one. And also you can create your ORCID record when you connect with another system. So when you are presented with this button here, create or connect your ORCID ID. So this means that you can share an authenticated ID with the system you are interacting with, and you can give permissions for this institution to read and write information from and to your ORCID record, and then this organization becomes a trusted organization for you, right? So this is the screen that you, once you click in this button, create or connect, you are presented to this screen where you are identified, the organization who is asking for permissions is identified, and the permissions are clearly stated here, and so you can authorize this connection. And these organizations become trusted organizations in your ORCID records. In the settings, you can see that. So here, for example, you can see that I am connected to the SciELO OJS repository. I gave permission to the system on the 25 February this year. They asked permission to get my ORCID ID, and I can revoke this permission whenever I want by clicking in this little icon here. The same with the SciELO preprints, SciELO Scholar One, and SciELO Scholar One API. I don't know why these are different. I think there was a change. But you can see here that I gave permission to Scopus and Springer Nature and other systems, right? So when you connect your ORCID ID to another organization system, you give the permissions that are being asked in the authorization screen. And by accepting this organization becomes a trusted organization for you. So this is just a mention about the works part at the ORCID record, where you can add works by manually or by importing through different databases we have agreements with. I'm going to go through it very quickly. We are going to share this information with you. This is just to show that you can manually combine works when there are no DOI on them. And when there is a DOI, the system recognizes this is a unique paper, even if you imported it from several sources, right? So talking about works as well in the ORCID record, so ORCID is working constantly on increasing the number of contributions that can be added at the ORCID record. So of course, this started with the science, technology, and medicine branches, but now we have a lot of arts and humanities and social sciences that are using ORCID to include their contributions. So another improvement of the new API, the version 3 of the API, ORCID API, is the inclusion of research resources. So the idea, as I mentioned to you before, the idea is to try to map by using identifiers all the elements of the research ecosystem, and this includes the infrastructure, a collection or an item that you used for your research, an equipment or a service that you perform. For example, you perform a statistical review or a genetic analysis or a review of the article or translation, you can add this to your ORCID record. And just to show with you some numbers, this is the print screen is how the research resources part section of the ORCID record looks like when there is a research resource included there. And here's some numbers to show you the number of items of research resources items that are already added, and the number of ORCID IDs that have at least one research resource added. And here you can see the three organizations that are ORCID member that are pushing this information into their researchers' ORCID records. The same, it's a new thing from the new version of the API, the peer review recognition. So this is how it looks like in a researcher's ORCID ID, ORCID record. Sorry, there is no information about what paper was reviewed, but you can see here that this researcher has a peer review activity in different journals and several articles inside the journal. So this is what I mentioned to you. There are more than 2 million items, right? Most of them are public. Researchers leave them as public so everybody can see. And here you can see the top 10 members adding peer review items to the researcher's record. So first of all, Blue Blondes, then we have the American Chemical Society, Springer Nature, and so on. So talking about ORCID and publishers, now we have more than 7,000 journals that are collecting ORCID IDs at submission. We have more than 100 journals that and publishers that signed the Publishers Open Letter, which is a collaboration between ORCID and some publishers that work together in a working group during 2 years. And this open letter is a letter that editors can sign on behalf of their journals to commit to ORCID best practices and implement some of them in their journals. We have an integration with Crossref and DataCite. That means that there is an auto update in the researchers' records that I'm going to mention to you in a little slides. We have an integration with OJS and ScholarOne, and to mention just two of the most used in the SciELO network. And also, what is important to say is that 75% of the 75%, sorry, of the ORCID registries. I mean, the people making creating their ORCID comes from publishers that ask that at submission. So talking about a little bit the best practices for journals. The two first items, authenticate and display, are the ones that can be performed with the public API. And the three others only can be achieved by using the member API, which allows the organization to add information to the ORCID records, while the public API allows the collection of the authenticated ORCID ID and the display in the articles. So best practices for journal is please use a system to manage your submissions, integrate your system with ORCID so you can collect authenticated ORCID IDs at submission and make the display of these ORCID IDs in your system, and in the articles. So the benefits for journals, as you can imagine or foresee, for journals, for authors and reviewer, is that this accuracy in the author and reviewer information, which is so important for other purposes, including indexing, visibility, and other purposes. I mentioned to you that ORCID serves as an information hub, enabling the authors and the reviewers to connect to their contributions and to share information when they interact with the publishing systems, and collecting IDs for all of your authors and reviewers during the publication allows for information to be easily shared, ensures that researchers can provide consent to share this information, saves researcher time and hassle, reduces the risk of errors, and critically enables researchers to get the credit for the work they are doing. And I would add that another benefit for journals is the cross-ref and data site auto-update process that is very beneficial for the authors and is granted from a message within the author's Orchid inbox. So this request is sent to the author's Orchid inbox after the publisher submits a new work to Crossref with the author's Orchid ID embedded in the metadata. So Crossref can update the author's record automatically whenever a new work associated with her or his Orchid ID is found in their system, and this from any publisher. So this is the big advantage for the author, and this requires that the Orchid ID is embedded in the metadata that arrives to Crossref. So to talk about SciELO Brazil and Orchids experience, SciELO Brazil is member of Orchid since 2017. It's as part of the consortia. SciELO has 4 integrations at the moment with Orchid: the OJS integration, Scholar One, the SciELO preprints, and the Dataverse integration, which is in development. The preprints is a new release this year. I'm going to show you how it looks like. And an interesting information is that 50% of the journals require Orchid IDs from the submission author through Scholar One, and the other 50% of the journals from the collection, right, from the SciELO collection, collect IDs via OJS and other systems. Here at the right, you can see for the 3 older integrations, the number of connected Orchid IDs to each of those systems is not irrelevant. It's a big number of researchers. Of course, there are some researchers that connected to Scholar One, to OJS, and to preprints. But anyway, it's a consistent number of researchers connecting their IDs to the SciELO Brazil systems. Talking about the criteria, so SciELO Brazil released in 2018, if I am not wrong, announced that Orchid would be increasingly adopted, should be increasingly adopted by the journals. And these guidelines say that at least one of the authors has to connect her or his Orchid ID to the article. The manuscript management system should collect authors, and then I added authenticated Orchid IDs, and that the editor-in-chief, the associated editors or section editors should preferably have an Orchid ID, right? So this helped a lot. Here you have the link. This helped a lot in the implementation and the adoption of Orchid by Brazilian journals. So talking a little bit about the auto update, and I'm almost finishing. We have this integration already built with Crossref and DataSite. That means that when the author connects with their Orchid ID to the submission system, the publisher includes this Orchid ID in the metadata when the manuscript is accepted. This information reaches Crossref and DataSite that will then assign DOIs to new publications, and then Crossref and DataSite will ask permissions for the researchers to add these new articles to these researchers' Orchid record. The same works for data with DataSite. So you can see here a little bit of the flow, right? I'll leave you that with this information. Here is the message the researcher receives in the Orchid inbox saying that there is a new article that has been published, and then the researcher can add this to their Orchid records. So there is here in step 2, you can see the authorization screen, and then the authorization given, and then how it appears in your Orchid record at the end. The source of the information is DataCite and Crossref. I'm going to talk a little bit about the configuration of the OJS plugin in the Orchid plugin in OJS, because we receive a lot of tickets, and there are a lot of editors who have troubles doing that. So I hope this will help. So the first step is to open a public API in your own Orchid record, so your personal Orchid record. I'm going to show you how to do this. And then you obtain the credentials you need to include in the OJS plugin, which is a client ID and a client secret. So with this information, you go to your OJS, you go to the settings, website, plugin, configure the plugin, the Orchid plugin with the public API. And then you add this information, the client ID, client secret to this. And the third step is to enable the collection of author and co-authors validated Orchid IDs to embed this in the article, right? So here I'm showing you in your Orchid record, you go to your settings that are in the top right part of your record, and then you have developers tools. Here it's in Spanish, I apologize, but it's developers tools. And then you fill this form, this information, and at the end of this process, you will have your client ID and your client secret for the Orchid public API. Here, just very quickly to show the print screens. So this is to enable the Orchid plugin. So you go to configuration, so settings, website, and then you go to plugins. Sorry, the arrow is pointing to the wrong place. You go to plugins, you enable the plugin here, and the right part is if you want your system to read information from the Orchid records. Then you configure the public API, and then you add your client ID here and your client secret here. And then you may want to enable the possibility of collecting authenticated IDs for your co-authors. So you have to go to configuration, so settings, apologies, workflow, and then you edit and you enable this functionality, which will allow you to send an email to the co-authors and collect their authenticated Orchid IDs. So the last versions of OJS allows you to do that. Here is the tutorial of this plugin. And I just would like to finish. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go a little bit quicker on that. I'm going to just to show you what things we can do with the Orchid data, the public open Orchid data, which is released, a big file is released once a year at the Open Access Week. And so here on the left, you can see it's a science paper published in Science and produced by the people of science using the public data of Orchid to make a study on researchers' mobility. And on the right side is the Australian consortia, Orchid consortia, used their Orchid data to build a map, an interactive map of the collaboration between the Australian universities and around the world. So here you can see how Orchid is being used and becoming mandatory in different initiatives, international initiatives. So here you can see it's OCDE made a survey in 2018 with 12,000 researchers about their behavior in their research activity, especially regarding digital practices. And so one of the conclusions that this study that is published here, you can see there is a blog post that we made about this, and there are links to this study. The first conclusion of this study was that persistent, trusted, and digital identity impacts in a researcher evaluation. The second conclusion is that Orchid is the most used identifier across the globe for a certain online identity. And corroborating a little bit of the first one, conclusion is that a stronger digital identity leads to more research engagement. So I invite you to have a look at this study. Here I share with you Orchid in public policies and guidelines. So you have here a part of these guidelines of the European Commission around open access and open access for publications and open access for data. And here on the bottom you can see how Orchid is included in the Plan S principles and implementation guidelines. Here is the European Commission again, that the European research systems and the Open Science Cloud should adopt Orchid as its preferred system of unique identifiers, and an Orchid ID should be mandatory for all applicants and participants in FP9, which is one of their programs. Here you can see 3 countries performed studies showing the institutional value of implementing Orchid in terms of time and money, of releasing researchers from the burden of having to include information all over in different systems. So this is my almost last slide. This is to remind some of the concepts we talked about here. So research organizations support their researchers by adding a certain information to their Orchid records through integrations with the member API. And journals and publishers could do the same, but they can support their authors using the public API and displaying their Orchid IDs in publications and by adding them to their publications metadata. So Orchid is a community effort, and we invite you to join us through our channels. Here is in Spanish, but you can see the email of support, Orchid help, and where you can register for an Orchid if you don't have one, and how to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna, for this wonderful presentation. I give you some minutes more because we do not have too much questions. I have here a question from Julie Parlo. I think it's the correct pronunciation. Can the system or in unaffiliated authors, part-time postgraduate students?
Sorry, can you repeat, because it just cut when you were
okay.
just...
Can the system accommodate independent researchers, such as unaffiliated authors, part-time postgraduate students, for instance?
Yes, sure. This is why it's important to, thank you, Julie, for your question. This is why we mentioned we make a strong, point on collaborators and not only researchers. So this is for students. This is for any people who is involved in, I would say, knowledge creation, right? So everybody's invited, and I don't know if you could see, but when you have the presentation shared, you can see that even, for example, artistic performances can be added as a product of your work, right? So yeah.
Great, great. I think we do not have much time for questions, but I would like to ask you, Anna, to highlight the importance not only to collect the Orchid ID, but also to persist with this information through the workflow until the publication. For instance, if you are collecting the Orchid ID, but this Orchid ID do not appear in your PDF or in your article, you are not using, you are collecting, but you are losing information through this chain of publication. So the importance, so I think that we should say to authors, you must demand your Orchid ID should appear in your article or in your PDF, and you, editor, should require this information, but not only require this information based on the submission system, but persist this information in the entire workflow of publication. This is important too. Sometimes you are collecting, but if you are not publishing this information, this article, this entire cyber infrastructure will not work well.
Exactly. The ID has to be included in the metadata throughout the process of production of the paper, of the journal, and has to arrive somehow, right? Somehow, no, in the metadata in this way to Crossref and DataCite for them then to contact the author and ask for this, because in fact the real true gains for the authors, right, of all this requesting Orchid for them at the beginning of the process is to have their IDs displayed in the paper, so anyone who is reading this paper from anywhere around the world that never heard about this research or never heard about this journal, right, can see all the things from this paper. Another world of information about this researcher is open, and this gives visibility. And the auto update is another big asset, another big important thing for the researchers, because they don't have to add this information manually, right?
Perfect. Another thing that is important to highlight is, for instance, we released SciELO preprints, and having Orchid ID is also one of the criteria to have this submitted manuscript approved almost automatically, because we can see the profile of this researcher and see all the works that they have, all the papers that they have already published. So in some automatic criteria, it is also important for SciELO preprints. I think that we do not have more time, people. Thank you so much for your participation. Now we are closing this first SciELO webinar, because we have another webinar in Spanish. I wouldn't finish this session before say thanks to our team working on the backstage: Alex Mendonça, Carolina Taniguchi, Francine Curville, and Jennifer Amato. Thank you, people, for all the support. And Anna, thank you again for this wonderful presentation. And thank you all in the audience participating with us in this SciELO series webinars. Thank you all. I hope to have you in another webinar that we will provide. We are preparing different webinars to editors. So I wish you all a good afternoon, and I see you soon. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Solange. Thank you, everyone from SciELO, and thank you to the SciELO editors. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.